Hello students, I am Raghavan Kumar Singh, faculty of US Academy and Institute. Today we will discuss class 6 histories 4th chapter, what books and burials tell us. In this chapter we will discuss the types of Vedas and describe Rig Veda in detail. And we will also know about how burials help us in finding the social differences and lives of the peoples at that time. The oldest book known all over the world is supposed to be that of the Vedas. They were written about 3000 years back and are the earliest literary source available. The word Vedas mean knowledge. There are 4 Vedas: Rig Veda, Sam Veda, Yajur Veda and Atharva Veda. The Rig Veda is the oldest Veda. It was composed about 3500 years ago. The hymns have been compared by sagas. These hymns were recited and passed from one generation to another until they were written down. The hymns are in praise of different gods such as Indra, the god of warrior, Agni, the god of fire, Varun, the god of sky, and many others. How do historians study the Rig Veda? While studying about the past, historians examine written source. They studied the Rig Veda. Most of the hymns in Rig Veda were in the form of dialogue. Historians study these dialogues to arrive at conclusion. The Rig Veda includes more than 1000 of hymns called Sukta or well said. These hymns are in praise of various gods and goddesses. Most of the hymns were composed, taught and learned by men. A few were composed by women. The Rig Veda is in Old or Vedic Sanskrit. The Rig Veda were recited and heard rather than read. It was written down several centuries after it was first composed and printed less than 200 years ago. How historians study the Rig Veda? Some of the hymns in the Rig Veda are in the form of dialogues. This is part of one such hymn, a dialogue between a saga named Vishwamitra and 2 rivers, Bees and Satlaj, that were worshipped as goddesses, cattle, horses and chariots. There are many prayers in the Rig Veda for cattle, children and horses. Horses were used in battles. Battles were fought for lands. Water and to capture peoples and cattle. There was no regular army, but there were assemblies where people met and discussed matters of war and peace. Most men took part in wars and also chose leaders. Wealth was kept by the leaders. Some were given to the priests and the rest were distributed among the peoples. Now, words to describe peoples in Rig Veda. Let us see some of the words used to describe peoples found in the Rig Veda. There are two groups who were described in terms of their work: the priests, who were also called Brahmins. They used to perform various rituals. The Rajas. They did not have capital cities, palaces, or armies, nor did they collect taxes. Sons did not automatically succeed fathers as Raja. Two words were used to describe the peoples of the community. One was Jana, the other was Vish. The people who composed the hymns describes themselves as Aryas and called their opponent Dasas or Dasyus. The term Dasa means slave. Slaves were women and men who were often captured in war. Now the silent sentinels, the story of the megalith. Big stones are known as megaliths, which were arranged by peoples and were used to mark burial sites. The practice of erecting megaliths began about 3000 years ago and was prevalent throughout the Deccan, South India, in the northeast and Kashmir. All burials have some common features. The dead were buried with distinctive pots, which are called black and red ware. Finding out about social differences. Objects are found with the skeleton, so archaeologists think that these objects may belong to the dead persons. There were differences in statues amongst the people who were buried. Rich peoples were buried with more gold beads, stone beads, copper bangles, etc., whereas poor peoples were buried with only a few pots. Were some burial spots meant for certain families. Peoples belonging to the same family were buried in the same place. Stone circles are boulder placed on the surface served as signposts to find the burial site so that peoples could return to the same place whenever they wanted to. Now, a special burial at Inamgaon. It is a site on the river God, a tributary of the Bhima. Here adults were buried on the ground. They were led out straight with the head towards the north. Vessels that probably contained food and water were placed with the dead persons. Now, occupation at Inamgaon. Archaeologists have found seeds of wheat, barley, rice, pulses, millets, peas, and sesame. So, these have been cultivated in agriculture. Cuts in the bones of many animals so that they have been used as food. Fruits such as bear, amla, jamun, dates, and a variety of berries were used as fruits. Writing evidences. First evidence of writing in China was found 3500 years ago. These writings were on animal bones and were called oracle bones. However, the Chinese did not know the use of iron. Now, the special burials in Inamgaon. We find burial dates back to 3600 and 2700 years ago. Adults were generally buried in the ground. Especially mention any made of a man who was found buried in a large four-legged clay jar in the courtyard of a 5-roomed house. Study of the bone structure helped to differentiate between male and female skeleton. The hip or the pelvic area of a woman is generally larger than a man. Sanskrit and other languages. Scholars have discovered many similarities between Sanskrit and European languages such as Latin, English and German. Historians came to the conclusion that Sanskrit belongs to the Indo-European group of language. Other languages like Hindi, Kashmiri, Sindhi, etc. also belong to the same group. Now the battles. Rig Veda tells us about battles fought for lands and cattle. Peoples met in assemblies and discussed war and peace. Wealth obtained, therefore, was distributed amongst the leaders, priests, and peoples. The Vedas were written down much later, the hymns, and passed it on to the other generation by memorizing and not writing. Manuscript of Rig Veda. Rig Veda contains prayers for cattle, children, and horse of wealth were distributed among the leaders, priests, and other peoples. According to the Rig Veda, yajnas were performed. Most men took part in wars. In Inamgaon, peoples were buried with their head towards the north. Vessels containing food and water were placed with them. The dead were buried with distinctive pots which are called black and red ware.